That time of year when Mr. Steve Hillwagon and others, of course, from the Buckeye media and the Buckeye players themselves beat down that path from Columbus to Indianapolis that's probably worn more than any other path from a college campus to Indy of anywhere in the country. We're talking Buckeyes, NFL Combine. Spring practice starts next week. Of course, we've got to give you an update and preview on that. Tony Gerdeman next to me from Buckeye Huddle. Also his podcast, Buckeye Weekly, and of course, College Football Playbook that you can find right here on YouTube. Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts 247 Sports, ready to get in the car, head on to the Hoosier State, and we will get there very soon. What kind of trip is that, Steve? We're talking 2 hours?
I live here on the east side of Columbus. I wazed it a little bit ago. It's about 2 hours and 50 minutes from my house to Lucas Oil Stadium. And where we'll be working is the convention center primarily, which is kind of up the street a little bit from the stadium. So that's where we'll be interviewing all of the NFL draft prospects, including 8 guys going over from Ohio State. And, of course, Ohio State, the all-time leader in first-round NFL draft picks, and we'll add to that with at least 3 and possibly 4 more names this year. So another banner year for the Buckeyes, the NFL draft, and at the Combine.
Tony, what do you look forward to most about the NFL Combine?
You know, I think one of my greatest sports regrets is never seeing Ted Ginn run the 40 at the Combine because he got injured in the national championship game, because that was one of the things I always wanted to see. It's always fun to watch the 40, and that's what everybody pays attention to. But also, we want to see what Jackson Smith and Jigba runs, because one of the thoughts is he's not fast. He's not a fast guy. And they said the same thing about Garrett Wilson last year, and Garrett Wilson came out and ran a sub 4.5. So just stuff like that. I'm looking forward to seeing what Zach Harrison does. We've known he's been an incredible athlete for long before he was a Buckeye. He's a 6'6" track star. So I'm interested to see what he runs. But yeah, Steve, am I wrong? Should everything just be held in Indianapolis? Like all of the teams, everything should just be in Indianapolis. The entire Big Ten should just be in Indianapolis. You just stay there. We go there so many times a year. It would just be best to everybody move there.
Yeah, I think the Indiana Department of Taxation has found me. They're sending me letters like, you work here so much throughout the course of the year that you may as well pay taxes here in the great state of Indiana, which I don't know how I'm going to dodge them. But, yeah, we're there. Used to be there every year for the Big Ten championship game. That was 4 years in a row. And that's kind of gone by the wayside the last couple of years. Maybe they'll get us back over there for that in 2023. But they usually have the preseason Big Ten football meeting there now because the championship game is held there. They've moved it from Chicago. A lot of it due to COVID, I think, was the primary reason that they moved out of Chicago. But Indianapolis, a great place. The Big Ten basketball tournament has been held there routinely. This year, unfortunately, it's moving to Chicago, so I won't be there next week for that. I'll be flying over it because I'm actually flying to the tournament this year. And so, yeah, it's our home away from home. I'm over there for travel basketball, probably 3 or 4 weekends a year. And then, Big Ten football. This year, Ohio State will play 3 games in Indiana in the first 6 weeks of the season, with games at Notre Dame, Indiana, and Purdue. So we'll be, again, spending a lot more time in the state of Indiana and hunkering down on at least 1 or 2 of those trips, probably in Indianapolis as well. So, yeah, it's our home away from home, definitely. And, there are worse places in the world, I'll say that. The downtown's got a ton of great restaurants and bars, and OSU fans love it when they get to come over for the Big Ten tournament or the championship game.
Plus, I-70 is always easy travel.
Yeah, pretty simple. No fuss, no muss. Indiana, IDOT, I don't know what they call it. In Ohio, it's called ODOT. I am awaiting the day, Tony, that our federal government extends the Eisenhower interstate highway system to the great state of Indiana, because it always seems to be down to 1 lane a lot of places. But, yeah, we'll one day those tax dollars will be at work for us, and Indiana, too, will have interstate highways.
Folks, we get Steve, we get Tony every week, typically Kevin Noon. Show your appreciation. These guys don't need to do this show. Don't say another word, Tony. They they don't necessarily need to show up every
Well,
week,
we
but
love
they
to
do.
do it.
Yes, and I'm glad of that. I am glad of that. So, not just an hour of their time, it's more about the expertise, it's more about the insight. And so, please show your appreciation. All right. We will take your comments and your questions and your super chat contributions, of course. We will also let you know that we got a Big Ten show starting next Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 hours plus a Big Ten talk with all of you. All right. So, who has the most on the line in Indianapolis?
Well, I think Jackson, to a degree, has got to show he's healthy. I don't think teams want to draft a guy who's damaged goods with that hamstring. Has that lingered? Where's he at? So I think that's one. I think DeJuan Jones in his hometown, getting some home cooking there for Mama, probably will show out, and he's got to show some agility at 6'8", 360 pounds, whatever he ends up weighing in at. He needs to show that he's got the agility to play tackle in the National Football League. It's one thing to have arms as long as telephone poles, to keep guys off of you, but those speed rushers, Nick Bosa, will also eat you up. So, in the blink of an eye, they're by you. So he's got to be able to do both. And I think that his agility is something that people will be looking for. And then CJ Stroud, it sounds like I think it's Saturday is when the quarterbacks will throw on NFL Network. And that'll be kind of fun to see him on the field trying to make all the different throws that you need to make. I thought he's coming off the best game of his college career against Georgia, even though they didn't win the game. I think he showed more in that one game against a great opponent than maybe he had shown in any other game. And to me, he's going into the combine on a high note. I mean, people who want to downrate him, in my mind, can do so at their own peril. So, yeah, to me, it's going to be interesting to see how those guys all do at the combine.
Yeah, I think I'll be interested to watch DeJuan Jones and Zach Harrison for sort of the same reason. DeJuan Jones had like a good day or two to start the Senior Bowl and then left. So that kind of irks some people in the NFL that, you show up, you flash, you make a good impression, and you're like, okay, I'm done. I've done what I needed to do. And Zach Harrison getting the invite, accepting the invite, and then deciding not to go. Was that an injury issue? Was that an agent issue? So those guys, I think, going into the Senior Bowl, had an opportunity to be second rounders. DeJuan Jones continues to climb. And so now they'll have to confirm some things or maybe overcome some things in the combine for no showing or leaving the Senior Bowl early. Because anytime you do something like that, it just creates questions in the NFL's eyes, and it may not some may not mind, but some always will. And so you've got an opportunity to answer those questions. And this will be the first time the NFL really gets their hands on Zach Harrison and gets a good look at him. I find it hard to believe they're not going to be pretty happy with what they see. It's just the fact that they didn't get to see it at the Senior Bowl. I think it irked some teams.
And based on our conversation when the invites were first announced, nobody got snubbed. There's really nobody left from the Ohio State team that didn't get an invite. Okay. Based on your observations of these various drills, not from an entertainment standpoint, but more from a practical standpoint, and what NFL scouts and people that you guys talk to, what seem to be the most transferable skills, the drills that seem to be most important?
I think it varies by position and player. I think for those defensive linemen, that 3-cone drill is very important to show that you've got the agility and the ability to change direction, because the way quarterbacks move around in the pocket, they're not a sitting target. They step up, they drift outside. You got to be able to go with the pocket and go get that quarterback and make that play. So I think that's the first thing is with that. I think with some positions, raw speed. I mean, you talk about wide receivers, you're looking for a guy who can get behind the defense or who can, at the top end of his route, achieve outstanding speed. And I think so that's something that they're looking for. Ohio State doesn't have a running back at this combine, but obviously 40 speed would be important for running backs as well. And then, you think about the quarterbacks. Again, agility is important for them. 40, not necessarily all that important maybe for them. I mean, it can be, but the NFL, if you're lucky to scramble for 10 or 12 yards and get down and get that first down, that's usually good enough typically. So, I think it just depends by position what you're looking at. Obviously, with the offensive linemen, you've got to have a blend. You've got to be able to be agile as well as extremely strong. And so I think that they look at the bench press max, or the bench press reps rather, to get an idea of that strength. But it's a combination of things, I think, for offensive and defensive linemen. So, the blueprint will tell you one thing. The dossier of all the 40 times and the reps and all that other stuff will tell you some things. But to me, putting the film on also tells you quite a bit about what kind of a motor a player has. Is he a self-starter and those kind of things? And I think that's got to be the ultimate, I think, when you look at it.
And even when you're talking about the offensive linemen in the bench press, the tackles with the long arms, they don't get too worked up if the reps aren't there because the arms are longer. So DeJuan Jones coming in with apparently like the longest wingspan of anybody in NFL history, like he could maybe blow some people out of the water if he did a ton of bench press, a ton of reps. But if he doesn't, they'll just be like, well, he's got the long arms have, so don't worry about that. But then you need like Luke Whippler or the interior guys, the guards and the centers need to really do well on that. The 40 is interesting to me because they do the 10-yard splits. That's where it matters more for like the bigger guys, the linemen and things like that, the first 10 yards, something like that. I think it's interesting in college where you see more about the miles per hour. They're wearing the GPS units and they talk more about miles per hour than 40s. So I wonder at what point, I guess it probably won't never get there with the combine because you're not necessarily asking somebody to go run 80 yards. You're just asking them to run 40 and you're trying to take it a little bit easier on them. But you don't hear as much about 40 in college as you do in the NFL with the combine. So that as GOJ says, 40 times is fan entertainment. And that's true. It is entertaining. But if a receiver runs a 4.3 instead of a 4.4, he's suddenly now a first rounder instead of a third rounder.
In terms of the current Buckeyes, you mentioned that miles per hour because sometimes we'll get articles written where certain teams are tracked and so forth. Do we know who's been tracked and what those numbers have been in recent years?
Tyleik Williams, defensive tackle for Ohio State, posted some numbers recently where he was one of the fastest, but I think it's like weight adjusted and mass adjusted. So you tune all of this together and he's like one of the fastest. He's always had a very good 10-yard first 10 yards. But so there are numbers like that floating around, but they're adjusted. And then you've also seen the pictures tweeted out of Ohio State's 40-yard dash chart sign in the locker room somewhere. And it's always been, kind of laughed at a little bit because you've got like a Bradley Roby's a 4.26 and you've got these 4.3s and all these 4.2s that never actually happened in the combine. So you take those things with a grain of salt. But yeah, I remember, we've gone in for interviews in the past, over the past few years in the Woody on the practice field, and there'll be up on the screen like Jeff Okudah, 22.6 miles per hour, Isaiah Pryor, 21.2, and they'll just have it who is the fastest, of camp so far. So in terms of who is the fastest on this year's team, keep an eye on Jaden Ballard. I'd say he was one of the two that was mentioned last year with J.K. Johnson, and since J.K. Johnson is no longer on the team, I'd say Jaden Ballard might be the fastest guy now.
Yeah, certainly Chris Spielman and James Laurinaitis are thankful that the Rams and the Lions looked at the game tape and not necessarily the combine results. And I'm not
Couple
even
of second
knowing.
round bums.
Yes, absolutely. We got Tony here. We got Steve here. You can catch Tony's work on Buckeye Huddle. His podcast is Buckeye Weekly, and the college football playoff right here. And of course, Steve, Bucknuts 247 Sports. And we thank Steve for posting these podcasts on Bucknuts. Very, very kind of him to do that, to give us more exposure here at the Voice of College Football and invite some other people here to our show each and every week, which is typically on Wednesday, but Steve's got a trip to Indy to make. Other highlights, how much has that trip changed, Steve, since you started? And Tony, you can chime in, of course, just in regards to, like anything else in, I was going to say the NFL, but it's certainly gone to college football with the various media days and so forth, where these events started as little small gatherings and they have just blown up into media events.
Yeah, it has changed quite a bit. It used to be held on the concourse of Lucas Oil Stadium in like a club, like an exclusive club room that they have there for people who are premium seat holders. And it was very limited space. In fact, there were sometimes, if you didn't get there early enough to get a workstation, you worked out in the hallway, sometimes on the floor in the hallway. That'll just tell you, 15 years ago, what this was. It was just not this mega event. Now it takes up this huge space in the convention center, which is the size of about 10 airplane hangars there in downtown Indianapolis, this huge, huge facility. And they have obviously a place in there for a fan experience. Fans can come in and watch the bench presses as they're done. And in an adjacent room, we have interview facilities. And then in another entire portion of the convention center is the workroom. So it's about I joke, it's not a half-mile walk, but it's at least a quarter to a third of a mile walk from the workroom down to where we do the interviews. And you only want to make that trip like once or twice a day. So you go when you go down, you're going down for the duration, and then you go back up to post all of your stuff. And so it is quite a production, and it lasts 4 days for us. And they've got it split up. So today is actually NFL personnel, coaches and general managers and presidents will be speaking throughout the day, and some of those will be featured on NFL Network. But the draft prospects start tomorrow. I think it's defensive linemen and linebackers tomorrow. Then defensive backs, we get to interview on Thursday. Quarterbacks, including Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, and wide receivers, including Jackson Smith-Njigba, on Friday. And then Saturday, we get to interview offensive linemen. So the players come in and do their media interviews before they do any of the workouts. While all this is going on, they are also involved in interviews with teams. It's kind of like speed dating. They put their name in for X number of players to come and meet with them at their cabana or their cubicle or whatever it is there at the convention center. And it's kind of a getting to know you type thing. And for quarterbacks, they might put a play up on the whiteboard or on the video board and say, what were you doing here? What was your thought process? And try and learn a little bit about the players in those settings. And then basically 2 days after we talk to them, they'll be on the field doing their 40s and their on-field workouts. So the quarterbacks, as I said, maybe Friday, but then maybe they're throwing Saturday or Sunday. I don't have the exact schedule in front of me, but that kind of give you an idea that it's an all-week event, and we'll go through, I think Sunday is the last day for the on-field stuff as well. So, it has really become a made-for-television production. And in the past, they've kept the media out of the stadium and only allowed NFL Network cameras in there. But this year, it sounds like they are allowing some media to attend those events. I'm not sure if we can video those workouts or just take still photos or just observe. But some of us will probably be going over there to check that out during the course of the week.
Yeah, just looking at the schedule, quarterbacks are Saturday, March 4th, along with receivers. So you'll see Stroud and Jackson Smith and Jigba that same day. So that'll be a big one to watch. That's like an all-day thing too. So that'll be something for Ohio State fans to tune in. So get your honey-do list done early Saturday so that you can sit in front of the television just like any old regular Saturday and watch some Ohio State football-ish. You'll see some highlights, that's for sure.
So, guys, I run into this all the time. Anytime I kind of spin that coverage and cross the line into the NFL, where a number of people don't want to hear about it, they don't care. Once that particular player takes off the scarlet and gray, it's sayonara, see ya. So any type of NFL draft, NFL combine, dipping into the NFL playoffs after the college season's over and the Super Bowl is a red letter day here for some people at the Voice of College Football. So in your interactions with Ohio State fans, how much do they care about success in the NFL?
I think it's like anything. If there's something to compete with another school, Ohio State fans are into it. It's, DBU, wide receiver U, QBU, all of those different things. It's kind of like with recruiting. Everything is competition, and especially with the NFL, like if Ohio State fans really want to get into it, they can tout their school with the best of them. And there's no matches in the Big Ten for Ohio State when it comes to the NFL. So why wouldn't Ohio State fans be into it?
Yeah, I think it runs the gamut. I think some fans obviously on Sunday want a reason to tune in and watch some of these games, and have enjoyed at times watching guys like Ezekiel Elliott do well when the Bears are doing well and Justin Fields is playing well. You'll see some interest about that on our message board. And certainly, all the other guys. I mean, the two Bosa brothers are among the best players in the league and up and down the line. So, yeah, I think it's a fun thing. I think Ohio State fans took great enjoyment knowing they had the two best rookie wide receivers in the game, this year. I'm having a hard time talking, with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. So that was kind of a fun thing for people to talk about. So anything they can do to brag about their university and how they develop NFL players, I think that's something that they like to tout. And obviously it's big for the program. It's a big selling point when you're trying to get high school kids to look at Ohio State beyond the fact that they play in a packed stadium and they're in the playoff 3 out of every 4 years or whatever it is. Has Ryan Day made the playoff 3 out of his first 4 years? Does that sound right?
That is correct.
Wow, that's a pretty good ratio. So,
no, I've heard he should be fired, actually, Steve. I'm not sure if you've heard that.
Yeah. I had people in my chat last night saying, is this a make or break year for the defensive staff? Did Knowles sign a 2-year contract or a 3-year contract?
I believe it was 2.
That's what I thought. I've got it somewhere. I'll have to look at it. I was like, if the defense holds this team back from winning a national championship, I like Knowles. He's a good enough guy. But I think, if they hold him back again, I think you got to blow the whole thing out and start over, in my opinion. So,
3-year deal. 3 years.
Okay. Well, we stand corrected. You can't blow anybody out. So, yeah, there you go. They better blow a lot of people out. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I don't think Ryan Day has shown that he'll go ahead and get rid of somebody for defensive issues, but it has to be like 2 years of defensive issues rather than just one. So I don't. The offenses that Ohio State has had to continue to miss out on titles because of defense, at some point, you just keep searching. And they brought in Jim Knowles to keep that from happening. And we know what happened last year. And now you would expect him to continue to get better. So I think things will be better, but they're still kind of burnt on some defensive back recruiting that they've missed out on over the last handful of years, and you saw that with all the big plays they gave up last year.
In the Tony, in the movie of my life, Gerald McRaney will play Jim Knowles, and I'll refer to him probably mistakenly at some point as Admiral Kilbride. So yeah, so there you go.
I will refer to him as he was Simon and Simon as well back in the day.
Yes.
Okay, now you make the connection with me. Gotcha.
You know, he had Mary Lou Hinner on as his ex-wife on the show on Sunday night. I was like, I'm here for this. So there you go.
Gerald McRaney, and I know we're getting off on a tangent, one of the best all-time, most underrated television performers.
Yep, I agree.
Michael, yes, I'm enabling you by posting your comment just because we don't mind stirring things up a bit. But no, we are not answering your ridiculous question. Of course, we have answered, Justin, your question about Jim Knowles. And we will move on to.
Well, I would say if it's just against Michigan, I don't think it's, Ohio State lost to Michigan last year and made the playoffs. So, like, they can have another implosion against Michigan. As long as they're doing everything else against everybody else and you're in the playoffs, like, how do you fire somebody for that? And it was a fourth quarter implosion. 3 quarters, Ohio State's defense was fine in that game.
Yep.
This expanded playoff is going to change the optics of everything in regards to fan perception of how well, there are going to be likenesses to the Buffalo Bills of yesteryear, 10 years down the line. Oh, our team always makes the playoffs, but they always lose. So what does it matter? And then we're going to have those teams that may never be able to win conference championships, but they regularly get in the playoffs and make noise and win championships. And people aren't going to care about conference championships.
And you've got for college basketball fans, if like Ohio State fans, their team's not making the Sweet 16, it's tiresome, and they want their coach fired because of it. And college football, do you have to make the Elite Eight? Like, if you're playing in the first round, do you have to win a game? If you're not playing in the first round and you get a bye and you never end up getting into the Final Four, does that also then come back to haunt you? Where just getting a first round bye isn't good enough anymore. You have to beat somebody. And so now it's like, but we're in the top 8 nationally, like consistently, as a head coach, you're saying this. Why would I be in danger if we're one of the top 8 teams just because we're not winning and getting into the top 4 against somebody, there's going to have to be some restructuring of expectations and what is good enough and what isn't. I don't know that making the playoffs will be good enough anymore. But wherein is there as Gene Smith would say, where's the sweet spot and what's good enough and what's not?
Yeah, a lot of people think that this playoff is going to be the savior of parity in college football, and I don't necessarily see it. We will obviously experience it and see how it plays out, but there's not going to be this automatic flip of the switch and suddenly pick your team across the board. North Carolina, Kansas State, your second tier team in each league. Wisconsin is going to be this powerhouse and be able to play with the elites. I could again see players not opting, your high end top 4 stars and 5 stars not opting for those schools after they see a run of playoff appearances without any success.
What happens to a Minnesota or Wisconsin when they're not making the playoffs and they should? Because you saw what happened with like Glenn Mason getting fired because you're only winning 8 or 9 games. You're not getting us to 10, 11. It's not good enough. So when the playoffs are open to essentially everybody and programs that have always been, 7, 8 wins aren't making it, is that like the carrot is there and they're not quite making it? Do those coaches get fired for not making it, or do they get to stay because they're doing as well as any coach has ever done there? Like they're hitting their average, they're doing the norm. But now with this being more open to other people, are the expectations higher, and does that cause more coaches to get fired because their middling program isn't making the playoff?
Yeah, there'll be some angst out there, particularly when you go to these mega conferences and a conference championship is out the window. it may be easier for some teams to make the playoff than to win their conference championship in some regards, or that may not be true. I mean, because some of these leagues are going to have 2 or 3 teams in a 12-team playoff, but year in and year out, the teams that recruit the best are going to win the league. So, like in Indiana that one year with Penix, they had a chance, to be a top 10 team that year, and under this format may have made a playoff. So it's I think it's impossible to predict, what the future is going to hold, but does this devalue the regular season? I don't know that I want to go that far. I want to maybe get into it and see where we're at.
I believe Tony and I are on the same page in regards to, for a limited number of games, you can make the argument that it devalues the season, but it so much more enhances the value of so many other games. Take your 7-2 Auburn LSU matchup that now becomes playoff ready and crucial versus, okay, this is just a decent matchup among 2 top 15 teams. They're not going anywhere.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I also think that in theory, it would encourage teams to play better non-conference schedules because, you can lose a game and still win the conference. Probably not going to happen that way just because programs generally only want to make things so difficult. And with so many 9-game conference seasons, you wonder if things might even start going back to 3 easy games instead of what Ohio State does, which is 1 tough game and then a middling and then an easy game. Will they stop scheduling those kinds of Power 5 versus Power 5? And some programs have never done it and will never do it. You look at Michigan getting out of the UCLA stuff to do their 3 non-conference games. I think it would be a lot better for the game if you do more of the Power 5 versus Power 5 non-conference stuff, obviously. But there's enough games to watch as it is. So I guess if Michigan and UConn is something that we don't have to watch because we're watching LSU versus Penn State, I guess I'm okay with that, sort of.
And if this college football landscape continues to tilt toward the SEC and the Big Ten, all indications are in that direction. It has for the SEC on the field, obviously. For the Big Ten, we are conjecturing based on other metrics off the field that weigh heavily in their favor, plus a team called USC coming their way, that you wonder if the college football playoff committee is going to honor records and just then make the schedule the default second option of, a tiebreaker, or they're going to just start, plucking 9-3 teams from the SEC and the Big Ten, and they'll supersede what other conference.
That's how I do it.
Teams will do.
That's exactly how I would go about it.
Select the best teams.
Yeah, just get the best teams.
Well, Ohio State's going to try to put together its best team in a long time by starting with the fundamentals in spring. Steve, what are your storylines as you get ready for next week? What do you think really will stand out to you, and what are you looking for more than anything else?
Yeah, it's going to be kind of cool to be out there on the practice field with this team for the first time next Tuesday, as they kind of turn the page. This has been two lost seasons in a row, and that's kind of been an abnormality in the last decade or so for Ohio State to lose that many games in a season. But and of course I'm speaking kind of tongue in cheek here, but I think that this team's got some big aspirations and want to beat Michigan, want to win the Big Ten championship, want to be in the playoff, want to get to the national championship game, all of that stuff. And dare I say it, win the national championship. There's no reason to think why this team can't be in the mix to do all of that in 2023. They were right there in the mix to do it despite the loss to Michigan last year. So in terms of what I will look for, only get to go and watch the early periods of practice, which is stretching and some individual drills. We don't get to watch a lot of 11 on 11 during the spring, maybe one full practice out of the 14 leading up to the spring game. And so obviously the quarterback position, we call it a battle with Kyle McCord and Devin Brown. Those guys will be probably getting equal reps with the ones all spring long. And we'll see at the end of the spring. I'm sure that Ryan Day, Corey Dennis, and Brian Hartline will track every rep. What does the play calling situation look like with Brian Hartline and Ryan Day? How do they mesh? What makes them feel comfortable going into the fall for how that mechanism will look? Running back, you don't have Travion Henderson because he's hurt. Dallin Hayden is a guy to me who's on the cusp of doing some really big things at Ohio State. Huge spring for him. So we'll see if he can make his case to make this a 3-man unit as opposed to just a 2-man tandem, as we saw last year. Can any of the young wide receivers push their way into the wide receiver core? I don't think Emeka Buka or Julian Fleming are going to practice. Isn't that right, Tony? Are both those guys out?
That's correct.
That opens the door for all the 4 freshmen who came in last year to get a chance to play. Jaden Ballard, who Tony mentioned earlier, one of the fastest guys on the team. And then offensive line, you've got to open up 3 spots. You need a new center, which is integral. New left tackle, which is integral. Those 2 positions in particular, wide open. Over on defense, got to improve the pass rush, got to improve the secondary play. There is just no 2 ways about it. Your 2 linebackers are back. They were both outstanding. Want to see if CJ Hicks, the freshman from this past year, can make a push as well. So those are probably the top 7 or 8 storylines that I would look at going into this spring. Just again, getting young guys, getting their first taste of college football for the early enrolling freshmen, keeping them healthy so that they can contribute in the fall. That happens a lot of times where early enrolling freshmen come in and get chewed up and spit out in spring football because they're just not ready for it. And sometimes those injuries can linger into the fall, but hopefully they stay injury-free. They got a lot of guys on the shelf this spring who will not rep. And that gives the opportunity for a lot of other people to earn some time.
Yeah, I always enjoy the first spring practice because that's usually one that we're almost always guaranteed to watch all of. So that gives you a good baseline, a good first look. That's where you're taking notice of, okay, who's the first guy in every single drill, who's repping first. And then when you get to see another first 15 minutes of practice 2 weeks later, a week later, you're seeing, okay, who's making a move? This guy was third, now he's first. So you've got those kinds of things. I think the message just maybe been relayed to Ryan Day that if you let the media watch more spring practices and more practices in general, there'll be less speculation and just more reporting. And if you let us watch what's going on, then we can talk about it. Or you can also set rules in terms of what you don't want reported. But I think the more you have people seeing what's happening, especially in the spring when there's really no tactical disadvantage to letting media in, then you can tell stories that are actually happening instead of speculating about stuff. Because if you lock us out, then we still have to talk, we still have to create content. But I will definitely, as Steve said, what the quarterbacks will be the thing. We'll see. You say splitting time evenly with the ones. What are the ones? The ones that we know of are Matt Jones and Donovan Jackson, basically on the offensive line. And how much work does Matt Jones even need to do at this point? So the offensive line for those quarterbacks, I think it's going to be an issue. So the 7-on-7 stuff will be important because they'll actually have time to throw the ball. The other thing one last thing I will definitely be watching for is where is Sonny Styles? Where is he playing? Where is he in the pecking order? Because I think I could see a safety situation with him at strong safety, Lathan Ransom moving from strong safety to free safety, and then Syracuse transfer Jahad Carter as that nickel guy. And I think all 3 of those guys could operate pretty well together in any sort of spread personnel, 12 personnel, anything like that, because of their versatility and their size and their skill sets.
Tanner McAllister was the focus of the attention by the transfer portal last year, based on his skill on the field, but also his connection to Jim Knowles, of course. And Tony, you made a reference to the safety position, and Sue brought up she's interested in seeing these transfers and specifically to the defensive backfield between the Syracuse and the Ole Miss transfers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Davison Igbinosun started 10 games last year for Ole Miss as a true freshman, started the first 9 and then lost the job and then started in the bowl game. And I think an interesting thing, even when he was starting, he was still rotating. So he's accustomed to that. So you could see that continuing at Ohio State. I don't think he comes in and I don't think you pencil him in as a starter right now. I think there are too many other guys on this roster who are also itching to start. And what Tim Walton said about Denzel Burke is he's not a starter. He's a returning starter. So all of the jobs are still up for grabs. And I expect Denzel Burke to start. As to who is the other starting corner, you could tell me any of those names, be it Jordan Hancock, Jair Brown, Davison Igbinosun. I wouldn't really be surprised. If you ask me to bet on somebody right now, I'm probably going to take Jordan Hancock because he's the oldest. But, it's Davison Igbinosun starting that many games as a true freshman in the SEC. It's not nothing for sure.
All right. We certainly have let's see, more comments than questions here, but Justin Fry needing to kick it into gear on the recruiting trail.
I think it was good for Ohio State that there were 3 talented Ohio guys in 2023, and now you've got to branch out nationally. And we'll see. Clearly, you've got until December to get some guys, but they need numbers and they need talent because there's been a downgrade. With Paris Johnson, I mean, you lose 2 guys early, that's going to be an issue. But the recruiting before Justin Fry got here had diminished, and it's there's just some highs and some lows. And right now you're dealing with the lows because the highs have gone off to the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, they brought in Victor Cutler from Louisiana Monroe, who I think is going to compete for a starting job, maybe center or tackle or guard, hard to say. To Fry's credit, I mean, they have gone outside the state of Ohio this year in 2024, and they've got a player, Ian Moore, 6'5", 295-pound offensive lineman from New Palestine, Indiana. He is the number 74 player overall in the country, the number 3 interior offensive lineman. So, that kind of debunks a little bit of what the poster was saying. I mean, they've that's his first full cycle. He's already got a national top 100 player. Get a couple more, or, one more in a top 200. I think that's a pretty good haul every year. So, they've got the material there. Donovan Jackson was highly recruited, and he's going to be a star for this team, I think, at guard. And Tegra Tashbola, I think, is a guy who's raw, but could give them a look at tackle as well this year. So they're going to be all right. I'm not going to get wrapped around the axle about the offensive line. I mean, if they go to Notre Dame and struggle, then, I say, okay, they got some issues they got to work through. But, I'd like it a lot better had Luke Whippler stayed. That center position is so important. And I hope, Luke is starting to get some run as maybe a 2nd or 3rd round draft pick. So we'll see. I think CBS had him number 100 overall, which would put him mid-late 3rd, I think. So, we'll see how that all shakes out and what he shows at the combine this week. But that position and left tackle, I mean, those are the 2 positions that have got to be keeping Justin Fry and Brian Hartline and Ryan Day awake at night, even here in February, going into March, just a little bit until they nail those down.
Well, you got Washington D.C. offensive lineman Jordan Seaton listed as the number 1 interior offensive lineman by the composite. Ohio State is seen as a favorite for him. So and he's a 2024 guy. So Steve said, Justin Fry is making some moves, and I think the longer he's at Ohio State, And the more he talks to players, obviously, the better they'll be for it.
GOJ's comments have all directed toward Ohio State beating everyone by 3 scores en route to a national championship. And then all of a sudden, boom, he believes Justin Fry's going to have an issue recruiting offensive linemen because nobody wants to pass block 70% of the time. Or maybe GOJ, offensive linemen would be attracted to Ohio State to pass block 70% of the time because although that may not be inherently what they like to do, they can see a better path to the NFL where they're going to be pass blocking 70% of the time.
Yeah, it's kind of short-sighted to say that. I think you watch those NFL playoff games that if you can't throw the ball down the field and have the time to throw the ball down the field, then you're not going to do anything. So, yeah.
Well, I will say Ohio State ran the ball more than they threw it last year. They run it more than they throw it just about every year. Because I'm just looking last year, they threw it 410 times and ran it like 460 times. The year before that, they actually threw it more than they ran it by about those same numbers. But this is a program that has under Ryan Day with J.K. Dobbins led the Big Ten in rushing, led the Big Ten in rushing in 2020 with Trey Sermon and Master Teague. So they have no problem running the ball. It's just you do what you have with the material you've got to work with, and so they'll run it 60% of the time if they've got the offensive line for it and the running game for it, or Justin Fields being more of a runner helped that running game. CJ Stroud being less of a runner, skews things. But even with CJ Stroud this past year, they ran more than they threw it.
Yeah, I think people would be surprised. It's the explosiveness, it's the efficiency, but if you look at the sheer number of runs versus passes, teams like Tennessee and Ohio State that had prolific offenses last season and are viewed as passing teams actually passed it in the 40 to 50 range in terms of number of pass attempts, meaning 40th to 50th in the country in pass attempts.
Yeah, and as Peace Clan mentions, the RPO stuff gets in there. The offensive line is still blocking run, so on those RPOs that end up being passes. So if they want to run block, they can still do it on some pass plays.
Talking Buckeyes every week with Tony Gerdeman from Buckeye Huddle. His podcast is Buckeye Weekly, and College Football Playbook is the new venture here on YouTube. And of course, Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts 247 Sports, who has got the car revved up and ready to jump in and head to Indy here very, very soon. Have you guys continued to be intrigued by the drama across the country involving media rights and possible realignment and defections from conferences? It looks as though in some circles, the Pac-12's hanging by a thread in terms of trying to cobble together some type of media platform or several, and otherwise might be susceptible to getting picked off by the Big 12.
I haven't followed it. I think that it's hard to believe that those remnants, the teams that are left over without USC and UCLA, would dissolve. I know there was talk that they would add San Diego State, maybe Boise State, is it? Or who would they add? SMU. Yeah, that's an interesting one. It gets them into the central time zone, I guess, and gives them, kind of like the Big Ten can now play Big Ten games at 10 o'clock Eastern time. They can now play Pac-12 games at noon Eastern time at SMU. So, that's interesting, I suppose. I don't think SMU is really a major addition. I think the ACC thing is kind of interesting, that Florida State is realizing that they're going to slip behind Florida and Georgia and LSU and Alabama. They're in Georgia, they're 4 or 5 main recruiting rivals. They're going to slip behind all of them in terms of revenue. And what will that mean? What will that look like, going forward for all aspects? How much money is enough money? I guess I don't know, but so lot of angst down there. I have a hard time believing that Wake Forest and Boston College are going to vote affirmatively to give schools like Clemson and Florida State and maybe Miami a bigger chunk of the television money pie because more people watch their games. If that's what it's going to be determined on, I don't know, but I have a hard time believing that. I mean, why would you ever vote to give yourself less money? I don't follow that one. And those agreements that all those schools signed seem to be ironclad that bound them to one another until the 2030s or something. So, yeah, it's a messy situation out there. Everybody's trying to keep up with the Joneses. The Big Ten is going to have more money than what was it? Forrest Gump said, "We've got more money than Apple or more money than God." I don't know, something like that. But yeah, it's going to be crazy here one of these days.
Well, you saw the Dennis Dodd tweet out yesterday and the day before about the Florida State Board of Trustees discussing the television contracts of the conferences. And the thing that people have to remember, like ESPN has latched on to the ACC for 20 years until 2036. And starting this year, the Big Ten is going to be making $50 million more per team than the ACC teams. And the Big Ten goes back to the negotiating table 6 years before the ACC. So like they are going to be so far ahead of anything going on at the ACC, like $50 million a year for the next 13 years. And that's just one piece of the television puzzle. And so with the, why are they talking about this? Are they looking to, and how do you even get out of the ACC? The grant of rights is such as it is. And you would need the entire conference to dissolve, and how many does it take to dissolve that? It was interesting. Kevin Noon, I don't know if you guys know him, posted on our board that, while they've been doing a Southern recruiting trip, talking to a Clemson person, saying Clemson has been looking at what it takes to join the AAU, which is kind of not quite a Big Ten prerequisite, but about as close as a Big Ten prerequisite as you can get. And so just the movement, or the searching for how to move, the looking for a way out, that's kind of going on in the ACC right now. But I don't know if it matters because of all of the contracts and the grant of rights that have been signed in there. Like, I don't know how locked down, how ironclad those things are.
This is something that I just struggle with. I mean, that graphic that Dennis Dodd put out said that NBC and CBS are both paying $350 million to the Big Ten. Theoretically, I know that NBC is getting some Peacock stuff in there with basketball. I don't know if any football is going to be on Peacock or not. I forget how that all ended up. But for 15 games a year, 16 games a year, that's $20 million a game that those networks are paying the Big Ten. Mark, you worked in broadcasting. Is a Big Ten football game, let's say it's even a good one like USC Ohio State. Is that worth $20 million for 3.5 hours of programming? I don't know. I mean, what are they doing this as a loss leader to promote NFL and the rest of their programming? I'm confused. Like, what do they get out of this for all that money? I don't know. Is that worthwhile? Can they make money on that?
Well, I'm trying to think back because we had access to every ad rate on every network. So I could at any time see, okay, that's a $75,000 spot. That's a $200,000 spot. And it was interesting to look at from time to time, but that's been a few years ago. I don't know what ad rates have done since then, but wow, 20 million. Yeah, that's on the high end. If I could do any kind of math and trying to put together, I don't remember what the number of ad breaks in a college football game was. It 28, 32. I forget the number now. Yeah, I can't really grasp that math in regards to the just that return. And that's obviously the simple formula that doesn't take a lot of other things into consideration.
Well,
Yeah.
it's either this or Pro Bowl writing, and what kind of ad rates are you getting there? And it's a captive audience. Sports is still a captive audience. So there's, as Steve was saying, it's not just the advertising for Schick or whatever. It's here's what we've got later on the network, because that's a lot of what like the Super Bowl is so that you can advertise your own shows and things like that. So even if they don't make it directly, you're trying to like cover it indirectly with just promoting your own product, and that's a lot of money. But the alternative is to not be in that space, and or to pay considerably less for the Big 12, and then it's like, well, what are you getting? At least with this, you're getting something. You may not be getting your money's worth, but you're getting a lot of something. It's like spending $150 at Golden Corral. Did you need to? No, but did you get a lot? Yeah, you sure did.
Yeah, $150 at Golden Corral. My goodness. Hopefully you've got like the entire
$20
extended
tip,
family
man.
with
Yeah.
you, or man, you've camped out for a few days or something there, or you're eating 34 Oreos, the equivalent of like I did last Monday here.
Yeah. You don't want to do that.
No, double stuff with 3 glasses of milk. That was a lot to take in, even for a sweet tooth like me, who's used to more the 15 to 20 range, but 34 was pushing it. But I guess I got to increase my college football knowledge and not miss as many trivia questions if I want to, or allow people to ask the most ridiculous questions in the history of the universe to make sure that I miss them. All right, folks, appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. It's our Buckeye show. So here's the deal. We typically get together every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, but things happen. We've got to coordinate 3, usually 4 schedules. So you got to be nimble, got to be quick, got to run the 3 drill cones. You got to be able to do that. So we are here every week. We have done that 202 consecutive times, typically Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. But subscribe, turn on the bell for the notifications. That way, when we're going live. I get the word out as much as possible. Need to do a little bit better job, maybe on Twitter earlier when we make the decision, but we get the word out each and every week about when we will be live. So again, turn on the notifications and you will be thus notified. Tony, where are you going to be? What do you got going?
I'm gonna record finishing up our spring preview, positional preview shows this week with running backs and cornerbacks. So you can find that on all of your podcast platforms of choice. That's the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. Writing positional previews as well, dropping the quarterbacks today. I've already done running backs and tight ends and defensive tackle, and so and maybe some corners. Yeah, corners as well. So you can find that at BuckeyeHuddle.com.
Steve.
Going to be all over the combine for the next 4 days with the 8 guys who are out there, plus OSU basketball wrapping up the regular season, and then going to Chicago next week for the Big Ten tournament. Probably won't be long, it doesn't feel like. And the start of spring football next Tuesday. So it's a 3-pronged attack over here, and never a dull moment, I'll say that.
Folks, we have dropped the link to Tony's new venture, College Football Playbook. It's right there in the chat. So we've made it easy on you. Just grab the link and you can check it out right there. And please give him a sub. And join us. We got Zach Smith coming on to talk, college football at 1:30 Eastern time. And we've got a Big Ten show that we're starting, Big Ten Live, next Monday at 6 Eastern over on the main channel. Maybe right here. We'll see how many channels we're going to put it on. Tony, thanks for being here as always. And Steve, you as well. Safe travels, sir. Eat well. Have a great time.
Yep. Looking forward to it.
And I'm sure you'll knock down a few beverages as well. All right, guys. Appreciate you being here. Maybe, maybe not.
If need be.
Okay. All right. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for being here, everybody. See you next week.